C.W.
This is my
Yes, sir.
great great. You calling it Bo? Is that what you go by? I never heard that. I did hear that. You ever heard C.W. called Bo? You ever heard C.W. called Bo? Yeah, you look like a Bo. He was my favorite. I call everybody Bo. That what you do? Yes, that's Constitution.
That's how we do it in the library.
No. We got out of this movie. You need to write a pistol. You can't be on a student pilot, you gave me one lesson, and then, because I got closed down. I'm a student pilot. Hey, I'm a student pilot.
I reckon they did a great start.
Barry, I think you're losing your wallet down on the chair. Could be.
Okay.
Ain't no money there.
You got a student pilot.
Yeah, I got a student pilot too.
Okay, well, welcome, everyone. This is a huge crowd for our library. My name is Cayce Webster. I work in the reference department here at the Cayce West Columbia branch of the Lexington County Public Library.
You say your name, Jason?
Cayce, yes, sir.
Spell that.
Jaishree.
What? Jason.
Cayce.
What y'all on? We can't hear on this road. You got to speak up.
Okay. I'll speak up. Maybe not the front row too.
That's why.
I don't have as much important to say as.
Well,
as
you probably better look at
CW.
it. I appreciate that.
Okay. Well, we're very, very excited to have the South Carolina Military Museum and Relic Room here for the first time. And I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Brad Worthing.
Okay. And I'm going to be as brief as possible. Just wanted to let y'all know this is the Noon Debrief. There you go. It is presented by the South Carolina Confederate Relic Room and Military Museum, which is just across the river. And afterwards, I've got some free passes to give anybody who wants to, whether you've been there or not, so you can go over and check it out. Particularly after this, you're going to see the Vietnam exhibit. We've been doing these programs at the museum for years. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
We can't hear you.
I've got voice problems. All right. I don't think CW has that problem.
Now we can hear you.
All right, boom, boom. Over at the museum, we've been doing these programs for several years, but the room that we use for that has not been available lately because of renovations, and so we kind of been branching out. We've had a few over at the Richland Library, and this is our first one here at the library where I can actually check out a book because I live in Lexington County, so that's good. Our speaker today is C.W. Bowman.
Hey.
As an American soldier in Vietnam, one of his many functions was that he was a tunnel rat. I think most of y'all have probably heard about how the Viet Cong, particularly in certain areas like in the Central Highlands, used to live down under the ground. They slept down there, they ate down there, and huge numbers in some cases. And it was down in just something like what a snake would live down, just a hole in the ground that went on for tremendous distances sometimes. And the only way to check those things out was to send a guy down there. And this was the guy with his unit that used to go down there. It was a volunteer mission. They didn't make anybody do it, but once you volunteered, you were the expert. And you just did it. You did it from then on. But I'm going to let him tell you about it, not me. He's given this a couple times at the museum before, and it's always fascinating. And I promise you it will be today. Once again, after he speaks, I got these free passes for everybody who wants to go. Someone might end up being me if you're unlucky, but I think it's going to be Fritz Hamer is going to be over there ready to give a free tour of the library, particularly the Vietnam exhibit, right after this. Say maybe about 1:30. Does everybody know how to get to the relic room? Okay. But it's about 2.5 miles from here, and it's very easy. You go over to Jarvis Clapman, take that over, and then kind of come in the back way of the building where the State Museum is. It's 301 Gervais Street. And that's it from me.
Can two
Please,
people get in on one ticket?
I'll give you 2 tickets. Okay.
I want to take my wife.
I got a whole bag of them. So join me in welcoming C.W. Bowman.
Need a bigger room. Anyway, Vietnam veterans, I want to say that this is not about me, it's about us. We all had our own private hell to go through. Well, some walk point, some in alert, some in helicopter, machine gunners, even the clerks back at the main base camp had to watch out for the mortar rounds. But, and we all made it home because we watched out for the guy that was on the left and the right of us, and they watched out for us. So, and we were not the drug-crazed baby killers that the news media had us made out to be. And with that, I want to dedicate this little talk of mine to a good friend of mine died about a week ago. He was my history teacher. And he was my high school history teacher. So, we're both getting old. But anyway, he passed away last week. But he was one of the few people that would talk to me when I came home. And you guys know that nobody talked to us when we came home. But we sat there long nights, drinking coffee, smoking Pell Mell or Lucky Strikes. He listened to me talk, I talked, and he listened. So God rest his soul. Now, before we get started, I want to answer 2 questions you got, so you don't have to ask me after the show. The first question, the answer is yes. I'm too fat to be a tunnel rat. The second question you got, the answer is no. After I get done talking, don't come up to me and ask me to go to your house and crawl down in your septic tank or sewer to see what's got it stopped up. Now, let's get on with it. July 1966, came home, drove up the driveway, mother sitting on the steps crying, the father standing there saluting, big brown envelope in his hand. Said, well, I guess I got drafted. So sure enough, opened it up. Greetings and citations. Your friends and neighbors have elected you to serve in the armed forces of the United States of America. Report to your induction station on August 10th, 1966. All go to the induction station. They lined us up against the wall. Said, anybody sick today? No. Anybody got any broken bones? No. Anybody got a note from a doctor? One guy did. He had asthma. But anyway, they said, y'all passed your physical, go in the next room. on us. So we go in the next room, they got chairs out, and they got little seats with questionnaires on them, multiple choice type thing. Well, nobody read them, we just checked the blocks, and we passed them all in, and Sergeant's sitting up there at the desk, and he's stacking them up, and he hasn't even looked at them now. He says, y'all passed your test. So in the next room, they said, all right, everybody take one step forward, raise your right hand, and repeat after me. We were in the Army. So I took my basic at Fort Dix and shipped me out there to the reception center, and you go through a processing, right? So I walk in the room and I sit down, the clerk's on the other side, I'm sitting down in a chair, he looks at me and he says, can you type? I said, what do you mean, can I type? I don't know, I was a machinist, I worked as a machinist. He says, let me check that out. He looked in the book, he said, yeah, he said, there it is, there's your job description. I said, I built turbine engines for submarines and dams. So he said, what do you want to do in the Army? I said, well, how about small arms ordnance where I can repair the weapons and stuff? He says, I got just a thing for you, and he writes 11B on the paper. Well, I was an idiot at that time. I didn't know what 11B was. So I go through basic training, right? Get my orders for Fort Jackson. 11 Bravo. I'm dancing around. All right, I'm going to small arms ordnance. Drill sergeant smacked me in the head and said, you idiot, that's infantry. Well, needless to say, I didn't have time to track that clerk down. I got down to Fort Jackson. They lined us up in the company area. First sergeant came out, looked around, and said, anybody here can type? I said, what's wrong with these guys? So anyway, did my basic training, or advanced infantry training, advanced individual training if you're strictly military, and got shipped off to Vietnam. January 8th, I landed in Vietnam. Let's see if this thing will work. There's that Long Binh. Long Binh is where they gathered everybody together and assigned them to units and stuff. And they formed us all up again. And they came out there with our orders. But they said, before we give you your orders, we got a question for you. Anybody here can type? I said, these people are crazy. Anyway, I was assigned to the 4th Battalion, 9th Regiment, 25th Infantry Division, Manchus. We were taking the Cayce Express from Long Binh up to Cayce. Back then in '67, most of the jungle was out to the edge of the road, and it was kind of shaky. So anyway, in the middle of the convoy, they got this truck. It's loaded with machine guns and you name it, but it's loaded. And they're putting us on the truck. They're giving us M14s. We're getting up on 5-ton trucks. I said, Sarge, where's the ammo? He says, it's in the ammo box up there in the back of the truck. I said, all right. And this guy named Gary Heater, I didn't know him from anywhere, but he kind of attached himself to me. You know, he was following me around. And he said, Bowman, where are you sitting? I said, I don't know where you're sitting. I'm going to sit up next to that ammo box. So anyway, we made it to Cayce. And that's the reception center there. That was in '67. Some of you people might recognize that. Had us in formation there. And they walked out, and we all had our orders hanging there, and they all looked at us, and they said, can anybody here type? Well, the key to being typed, if you said you could type, you immediately disappeared into the orderly room. And you were a clerk for the rest of your life. So anyway, I got assigned to the 4th Battalion, 9th Infantry Regiment. First sergeant come out, there was about a dozen of us assigned that day, maybe 8 or 9. Anyway, we looked this over. Any of you guys, can you type? No. So anyway, we spent a week there, went through jungle training, which map reading, jungle training, it wasn't much to it. So, but then we got assigned, well, this was my LT. I was assigned to the 2nd Platoon, 2nd Squad. His name was Rupert Sargent. And anytime somebody came in, they'd say, "Who's the LT?" We say, "Lieutenant Sergeant." And they'd look at you kind of funny. Lieutenant Sergeant, I say, "Yeah, that's a new rank." But anyway, this guy was awarded Congressional Medal of Honor, and it had to do with tunnels. We were trying to get in the tunnel, truck door open, 2 grenades come out, and he dove on them. Cost him his life, but he saved the guys around him. So that was the Cayce base camp. Up here, let me see if this thing works. Probably won't. No, it won't work on the screen. Anyway, this is where my hoochers were. This place here, if anybody was in Cayce, it's called Ann Margaret. That was the last bunker going out that backside of Cayce, and the rest was the Hobo Woods. That was all badlands out there. But the problem with that base camp was it had basically 200 kilometers of tunnels underneath of it. Huh. We could secure the outside of the perimeter. We couldn't secure the inside the perimeter. And they told us when they said, "Okay, when you walk around base camp, be alert because somebody might pop up and shoot you." So, but out of the year I was there, I might have spent 2 weeks in that base camp. The rest of the 4 base camps are out in the jungle. So, there I am, FMG, fairly new guy. You can tell, nice, clean fatigues. The other guys know what FMG was. But anyway, that's John Guys. He was from Bear Mountain, New York. But yeah, he just scared the hell out of us. But I was the only guy. I was out for a month. So you go out like that, and you come back looking like that. But I was the only guy in the whole company carried an M14. It was M14E2. I was out there for a month, and they issued an M60. The early M16s weren't worth a hoot. When they issued it to you, they taped the cleaning rod to the side. And say, "Oh, they told us you didn't have to clean these rifles." I said, "No, it's not the cleaning. That's not the empty casing out in the chamber when it gets jammed in there." And the other guy said, "Well, remember your weapon was made by the lowest bidder." So anyway, I went back in and I went to the supply room and an M14E2. The E2 had a selector switch on it. You can make it fully automatic and rock and roll. But supply sergeant said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want that M14. He said, "You can't have it." And the captain was standing over there and said, "Well, why can't he have it?" So I ended up with it. So, that's how I got the. But since I was the only guy that carried an M14, I carried 22 loaded magazines. Had them in my rucksack, had them in my pocket, had them everywhere I could stick them. So, and I had that 5-round stripper clip in my helmet. I figured if I got down to that 5 rounds, I was in big trouble.
The M14 fires 30 caliber, right?
Fires 7.62 by 51. Yeah, and that's later on in the field. You see how much weight I lost by where my wristwatch is. It's about halfway up my arm. Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, but I came back from Vietnam. I weighed 138 pounds, had a 28-inch waist. But my wife cooked so good, I just blew that all to hell. But anyway, we went up to Trang Bang. They sent us up to a place called Trang Bang, and that's, if you've seen that picture of the little girl running down the street with the clothes burned off her and stuff, that's where Trang Bang was. And the Americans did not drop that napalm, the Arbans did, so. But anyway, we built that fort base camp and worked out of there for several months. And on the other side of that, well, let's see here. A lot of people don't think there's only one Ho Chi Minh Trail. There's more than one. You had the Ho Chi Minh Trail coming down from the north here and emptied out at Tay Ninh down here. Well, Trang Bang was just below the Tay Ninh, and I'll show you another map. But then they brought weapons and ammo and whatever up out of the Gulf of Siam into where the Iron Triangle was. The Iron Triangle was just above Saigon. Let me get on this side. There's Saigon, there's the Iron Triangle, and that was Ben Suc, Ben Cat, and Phu Cam. And that's where most of the tunnels were. And let's see, there's Cu Chi, there's Trang Bang right there. And this is one of the places that the Ho Chi Minh Trail from the Gulf of Siam came through, right through where our forward base camp was. The other one emptied out of, God, where is it? Goody Hall, I don't want to go. Anyway, there it is. I saw Tane Inns here somewhere. Anyway, about up here, and everybody was trying to get to the Iron Triangle because that's where Saigon was. Let me get over here so you can see again. So every day, we didn't have a lot of big major firefights, but we had a lot of ambushes, a lot of, you're always wound up real tight, and a lot of booby traps, and there were plenty of them. So, but anyway, that's where Operation Cedar Falls took place, and that was, they were going to clear out all the tunnels, and that's where that photo of me was taken. This, the Army came out with this later on. I never saw it. They had a setup, a 38 with a silencer and a headlight that you can control with your mouth. And I never saw one of those, but I figured just for curiosity, I'd put it in there. But now to give you an idea how hard it is sometimes to find a tunnel, what gave this tunnel away here was that piece of bamboo there. That's an air pipe down to the tunnel. But then that's him coming out. We went down with the old Army flashlight. You had to beat on it a little bit, make it work. But I always held mine out to the left.
Good idea.
Because I figure if they're going to shoot, they're going to shoot at the light.
Yep.
And I carried a 45, and I did empty one of those down there in the tunnel, and that's why I can't hear now. So, but now there's a typical trap door here, but you just didn't run up there and open the trap door. You tied a rope on it or a grappling hook or something and snatched the door open. Because underneath, they usually had it booby trapped with a hand grenade. It was on a swivel or a hinge. And if you pop that thing open real quick, you're going home to see the Lord. You're going to be full of shrapnel and whatever else. After you got the top off, actually before, well, it's a combination of things. You find the trap door, but then you got to look for the booby traps around the trap door. These are what they call toe poppers. They were pieces of bamboo with a little wooden plate in the bottom with a nail driven in it. They put a rifle round or a shotgun round dropped down in there, and that bamboo was just strong enough when you stepped on it and pushed that down, the primer down against the nail, it'd blow the end of your foot off or put a hole through your foot. But yeah, we call them toe poppers. And then they had, this is why we had to destroy all of our sea rations cans after we ate, knocked them flat. Hand grenade fit inside them perfectly. And they would take grenades and what they call short fuse them. So instead of having 4 to 6 seconds to get away from them, you didn't have anything. Once they come out and that spoon flew off, they exploded. So, and there's a typical trail there, and they got one on each side, so you got a double header there. So you can't get away from them. And then the famous bear trap. So when you stepped on that, your momentum of you going down, you're not going to stop yourself. And the further you went down, the more pressure you put on those boards, and the more they push them spikes through your legs. But that wasn't the only problem with the spikes. Most of them were dipped in human waste. So if the spikes didn't kill you, the infection did. So that was pretty common out there. This gives you an idea of the tunnel. It's a small complex. Room for the troops to sleep. You got ammo and weapons stored down there. Some of them had hospitals down in there. You never knew what you were going to run into when you went down in there. So, the tunnels are also booby trapped in certain places. So, there's another. We found manuals down in there how to build the tunnel, how to build the trapdoor. They had specifications of how to make it waterproof and everything. So everybody said, well, you know, we throw tear gas in there or throw a hand grenade in there. It just didn't work. You might mess up part of the first level, but if you've gone down 3 and 4 levels, it didn't bother them at all. Yeah, so, and then you had places where you could go in the tunnel and there'd be water. You could go down in the water and go underneath and come up on the other side and find some more tunnels. So. Now this guy, when you're crawling through the tunnel, this guy's a dummy. I know he's a real dummy though. He's not looking up. That little thing above his head, there he is. Green pit viper. We call him a 3-step snake. He bites you, you take 3 steps and you were dead. But it was common for him to take pit vipers, nail their tails to a board and hang it in a tunnel. So if you were crawling through the tunnel and weren't looking up or paying attention, one of those bite you on the neck or the face, you wasn't going to make it out of the tunnel. So that was one of the things you had to look for. Then you had to look for these guys. These were the green leaf ants. They'd make the fire ants look like chumps. You can always tell when a guy bumped into a nest of those. He'd be standing over to the side, tearing his clothes off, and his buddy would be pulling ants off of him, and little pieces of meat would come with it. So, yeah, once they locked down on you, they wouldn't let go. I could take a stick and poke at them, and they'd lock down on the stick. I could twist their head off, and they wouldn't let go. So, yeah, they were brutal. And then every now and then you bumped into these guys. Of course, that was the big black scorpion. If he stung you, you'd get sick. It's the little ones that would kill you. Yeah. But they would scare the hell out of you, I guess. But they come running out. You'd be surprised how fast you can back up. And then they had the old punji pit in the tunnels also. They also had false walls where they could shoot you through the wall. They had another trick was they'd take a piece of rebar or a big piece of bamboo, and like 2 guys were running the tunnel. If your buddy looked up to the next level, they'd jam it through his neck and go across the hole where you couldn't pull him back down. And he's just hollering and screaming, and you have to leave him because you can't get him out of there. And you never knew what you were going to run into. So there's one of the rooms down in there, and they had some pretty sophisticated places. They had operating rooms down there where they would put parachutes up in the ceiling to keep the dirt from falling down, and just about anything you wanted. They had everything down in those tunnels. You'd be surprised what pulled out of it. Then sometimes you bump into this guy. I did once. That was enough. Well, there was more than him. There was more than one, but that's another story. And I was telling somebody earlier. They told me, said, Bowman, since you're running tunnels, we're going to send you back to EOD so you can learn to blow them up. I said, well, damn, that's 6 months out of the field. I said, yeah, I'm ready to go. I get back there 3 days later, I'm back out in the field. I'm a demolition expert now. So, anyway, you see that look like white clothesline cord down at the bottom there? That's deck cord. That burns at 27,000 feet per second. And we use that a lot to cut trees in half and set charges with and stuff. But, Yeah, there's an entrance there, and you can see the white cord going down in there. I set a charge down in there, further down in. But, yeah, we carry, you know, it was harmless until you put a blasting cap on it, and then you better be careful what you're doing. So, but yeah, there I am, 20 years old, and you believe that's me, there's the tattoo, damn it. So, this tunnel here, my foxhole buddy Gary and I used to run tunnels with me, and we were down in a trench and going into a bunker, and we got in the bunker and found an opening to a tunnel. So Gary said, well, I'll go first. And he started crawling in and he stopped. I think my head butted his butt, but I said, what's wrong, Gary? He said, a big spider. You know, the spiders down in there were like this big, you know. And he said, big old spider here on the wall. He said, give me a stick. I said, all right. I backed out and got him a stick, and he's trying to hit this spider, and he can't seem to hit it. So I said, back out of the tunnel, Gary. I hit him. You know, so I smacked him, and it dropped down in front of me, and I had to throw it in reverse because he was coming after me, so I'm trying to beat him with this thing stick and back up. So we finally got rid of the spider and went down to the end of the tunnel, and there was a trapdoor going down. So I told Gary, I said, well, I'll go. And we got the trapdoor open. I didn't realize it at first, but I had to put my arms over my head like this because my shoulders were too wide to fit through the trapdoor. So I dropped down, had the pistol in one hand, light in the other, and I see down through the tunnel, and there was a bunch of ammo cans and other stuff stacked up along the walls. So Gary dropped down behind me, and then that was actually like an escape tunnel. There was another short tunnel that went off to the side, and you could come out there. But I located that, and then I went back in, and we went down to the end of that tunnel. And another trapdoor went up. So Gary said, well, I'll look up there in the trapdoor. And he dropped back down real quick. I said, what's wrong? He said, there's a claymore up there. I said, claymore? Well, that's our claymore there. That's got 250 ball bearings, steel ball bearings in it. I said, you can set it at the end of that room down there, this room, and set it off, and it would wipe out the whole room. Well, what was up there was a Chinese claymore, which we called squad killers. They would put them along the trail, and when they blew it, they'd wipe out the whole squad. So, but these things were like this big around, and like this thick. And could be rebarb in there, could be rocks. Anything they could pack in there to kill you would be in there, including the kitchen sink. So anyway, one of these is sitting up there wired up, right? So Gary looked back up there, and he crawled up there, and he hollered down to me. He said, Bowman. I said, what? He said, give me your demo pliers. I'm going to cut the wires on this thing. I said, all right. I handed the pliers up to him, and I dropped down a second, and this light bulb went off in my head. I said, whoa, wait a minute, Gary, what are you doing? And I look up there, you got all the wires in one hand, and the pliers ready to cut them. I said, don't do that. He said, why? I said, you blow us up. I said, cut them wires one at a time. He goes, oh, okay. It was like nonchalant to him. But anyway, we got that disarmed and trying to find out if there's another trapdoor went somewhere, but we couldn't find any more of the tunnel. But anyway, we came out. That's me up there, and Gary handing stuff up to me. And that's what came out of that tunnel. I threw 250 K98s out of there, machine guns, recorderless rifles, and then the old stick grenade. I got one right there you can see. Yeah, thank God a lot of them were duds. Yeah, a lot of those were homemade, but they'd still hurt you if they went off, though. Yeah, all that. Everybody in the company got a rifle to take home.
What's the can with the hole?
That was just something that, it was down there, it was a drum that could have, they'd use glass vials that had morphine and stuff, and they would fill up baskets with them and whatever medical supplies. They just pack them in barrels, whatever they could. But that's scary there. Yeah, and I never know how he attached himself to anybody did. When we got assigned, we went down and we were down in Ben Chun, and they were assigning us to platoons. And the captain got to him, he said, "Can I be assigned with Bowman?" I said, "Who is this guy?" So anyway, we shared the same foxhole, got rained on together, slept together, ate together, yeah. But later on, he stepped on a bouncing Betty. Yeah, and he told me he knew what it was. He was running down the dike, had a radio on his back, and he said he heard the click, and all he could think of was to dive off to the side. Well, after it blew, I got to him. He was laying on his back. His left foot was up behind his head. It broke the femur in 8 places, broke the shin bone in 13, broke his ankle, split his left arm from here to here. He walks around now like he's hitchhiking. Blew the left cheek of his butt completely off, and put a hole in his side and one behind his ear. And he wanted me to give him a drink of water. I told him couldn't do that. He said, "I don't know what kind of internal injuries you got." He said, "Well, give me a damn cigarette." I said, "All right." And he says, "Hey, Bowman," he says, "I lost my color vision. Everything's in black and white." I said, "Well, I'll tune you back in when they get you to the hospital. Don't worry about it." So, but he's out there in Texas now, and I go out to visit him every now and then. And when I go to visit him, he introduces me to all of his friends. He tells all of his friends he's my half-butt friend. You can interpret that however you want. But anyway, they put a brace on his leg. Yeah, well, that's what a bouncing Betty does. The first charge is designed to throw it up in your crotch. The second charge, it explodes. And that's where it cuts your legs off and whatever else. But that's Gary in the hospital. Now, they put a brace on his leg, and he drug that left leg around for years. And I went out to visit him. He said, "You got a rifle or a shotgun I can get off you?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take you one." I took him out a shotgun. We messed around for a week, and I went back home. He calls me up about a week later. He said, "Bowman, listen to this." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I went down to VA the other day, and this doctor walked in. He said, I put my foot up on the chair. He said, 'Hey, Doc.' The doctor said, 'What?' He said, 'My best friend came up from South Carolina and brought me a nice shotgun.' He said, 'I want to give you an opportunity. Either you can amputate that foot, or when I get home, I'm going to blow it off.'" Well, they had to amputate all the way up to his knee because he had a steel rod in his leg. But it leveled him up, and he was just as happy as he could be. He can get around. Of course, now age has caught up to him. He's in a wheelchair on oxygen now. But anyway, some of the items we pulled out of tunnels, his medical gear. There's mortar rounds, B-40 rockets. Yeah, we were hit one night, and that's a B-40 rocket there. And the next day, I walked down, Gary was down in the foxhole from me, and said, "Hey, Gary, you had a rough night?" He said, "Oh man, it was crazy." I said, "Yeah." "How about look behind you?" He said, "What?" He turned around. One of those was stuck in the ground right behind his foxhole. Didn't go off. So, yeah, it was some interesting nights. But, and they were 51 calibers, mortar, 82 mortars. Like I said, no telling what you're going to find in the tunnel. But that's a 122 millimeter rocket. They hit your line with 50s, and the 50s hit the bunker, they'll tear out a sandbag. That thing hit your bunker, it's taking the whole bunker with it. So, yeah. Now, if you all feel energetic, you can go to Vietnam in the tunnels of Cayce or a tourist attraction. You can go in there, and now if you look, give you an idea, the tunnel was actually this size. They enlarged them so the big Americans could fit through them. So that'll give you an idea why I had to crawl on my hands and knees to go through there. So,
Hard to turn around, wasn't
it was extremely hard. Yeah. You know, you say turn around, but one of the worst experiences I had in a tunnel was, you know, after that I got blown up. You know, nothing mattered anymore after. You know, when we got there, they took us in a room in a tent. He said, don't piss anybody off. Everybody carries a weapon. Don't worry about the bullet with your name on it. Worry about the one that says anybody. Because there was a lot of spray and pray. I said, sometime this year you will go crazy. Maybe more than once. When you go home, you'll never be the same. He was right on all 4 counts. So anyway, I forgot completely what I was going to say.
Turning around.
Oh yeah.
Can't type.
Turning around. They had a frame on this on a trap door, and I was trying to see down into the next tunnel. Well, the frame gave away. You know, smart guy I was. I said, when I hit that bottom of that tunnel, I'll just do a somersault, and I'll be good to go. Well, that didn't work out too good. Because this part of my body was like this. This part of my body was like that. My legs and feet were like this, wedged into the tunnel.
Oh,
Now, you want to talk about panicking. Yeah, I was close to losing it. And I just had to do a lot of talking to myself. And my biggest worry was they were going to crawl up there and shoot me in the face. And they couldn't miss this big face, so. But anyway, it took me about a half hour or so to get out of that mess. And yeah, I was kind of exhausted after that. But yeah, that was about my, well, other than bumping into somebody, but that had me where my heart was. You know, it was like the first time I ever did anything related to a tunnel was in a village. That's back when I was at FNG, and they had this big community bunker. And it was like maybe big as this room, maybe a little bit bigger. They said, Bowman, go down there and check that bunker out. I said, it's just a bunker, all right. And they give me a flashlight, it's got a red lens. Well, you know how good that is. Anyway, I go down a set of steps to get there, and I stop, and it's pitch black. But I can see a doorway on the other side, on the other end of the bunker, right? I said, if I can make it to that door, I'll live through all this, you know. And I didn't look left or right or anything else, and I walked to the left of that bunker and come out the other side. My heart pounding, all the hair standing up on me. And Sergeant said, did you see or hear anything in there? And I said, Sarge, the only thing I heard was my heart pounding. But anyway, it was then the adrenaline rush. The adrenaline is, God, I can't describe it. You get hooked on that. You start doing crazy things, but you got to be careful. Anyway, yeah, you can go there and go in the tunnels and, well, I lied to you. I could type. In high school, I took typing, so I was trying to hook up with some dates because it was all girls in typing. But they got mad at me because I could out-type them. I was typing 60-some words a minute on one of the manual typewriters. I'd make that thing rock and roll. But never did tell the Army I could type. And that was one of our shoulder patches there, so. And that's about it. Any questions?
What did they do with all the dirt they excavated from? Where did they spread it?
It's hard to say. You know, sometimes you'd be out in the jungle and you see little piles of dirt here and there, and then, you know, the monsoons come through and they wash away everything.
Yeah.
You guys know that, but everything turns to mud and whatever and floats away. So a lot of them, they would get the whole village digging tunnels and stuff. You know, like the first layer, they would dig like a massive trench. and you know, it might be zigzag or whatever, then cover it, and then use that dirt to cover that with, and then they'd start going down. And they, you know, you could take that dirt, dump it out in the rice paddy or whatever, but after the monsoons, it was gone. It washed everything away.
You said you ran into some guys down there, but you didn't tell us what happened.
Well, I'm here, aren't I?
Yeah. Did they run or did you kill them?
Well, I tell you what, when I got in the room, and they had like bamboo bunks and stuff like that, and they were lounging on the bunk and stuff, but they had AKs leaning up against the wall and everything. And situations you don't think, you react. So I emptied out the 45, and when the slide locked back, I said, it's time to leave. So I'm going back out of the tunnel. It scared me to death. I don't care who was in front of me, I'd have run over top of you. I got halfway back out of the tunnel system, and I got mad because they scared me so bad, and I didn't want my buddies to know I was scared. So I got out there, and they said, what's up? I said, there's a gooks in that tunnel. And I gathered up about 10, 15 pounds of C4 and set a charge, and I went back down there where the trap door was, pulled the igniter, opened the trap door, dropped it down, and came back out. And I stood up on the ground, and the ground went boom. And I figured that took care of the rest of them, unless they left.
How many tours did you do, and how much of that time was spent in the tunnel?
Well, first tour was over in the Iron Triangle, Angels Lane, Power Creek, whatever. Whenever we came across one, you know, you never knew. And I never kept count, so I can't. The second tour I was fighting in Saigon during the Tet Offensive, so, which to me was worse than the jungle. I talk about that, I won't talk about this, you know, but
How long a stretch did you do as a tunnel rat? How long a stretch?
a whole year,
A whole year?
almost a whole year. Yeah, until around October, somewhere around there.
How'd the bad guys avoid these vipers and the spiders and all that? I mean,
Oh, they all knew where everything was. They had little markings and might have a couple stones positioned in a certain position. You know, yeah, they had all kind of ways to mark their trails and stuff.
Did they use flashlights like the Americans did, or they?
Nah, they had little lamps.
They used lamps.
They had little, I don't know what they burned in them, but yeah, they had lamps. Well, they had flashlights too, but most of them had those little lamps to go through, so.
Did you carry extra batteries for your flashlight?
Not in my pocket.
What was the purpose of going into the tunnels as opposed to just flooding them with an explosive and blowing them up?
Well, you can never blow them all up. Mostly it's for intelligence. I pulled a lot of, Gary and I went in one, we pulled out a map about that wide and like that, had 20, 30 overlays on it, showed all the base camps and caches of weapons and stuff, and BC villages, and we extended the operation by 2 weeks because we did that. And my buddy said, the next time you find a map in the tunnel, leave the damn thing. Questions?
How long did you stay in the Army, sir?
I stayed in 5 years. I was going to make a career out of it, but I came back. They made me a drill sergeant on Tank Hill, and I always wanted to go to Germany, right? Well, finally got on levy to go to Germany. Now, I've been a drill sergeant like 2.5 years. Tour is supposed to be 18 months. So I'm coming down Tank Hill because we were at the bottom, D51. I go back past battalion headquarters. Clerk sticks his head out the window and says, Staff Sergeant Bowman, Command Sergeant Major wants to see you. I said, oh, God, what did I do now? And I went in there, I said, you want to see me, Command Sergeant Major? He said, yeah, Bowman. He says, I just want to let you know I canceled your orders to Germany. I said, you what? He says, I canceled your orders to Germany. I said, what'd you do that for? He said, because I want you here. I said, but I've been here 2.5 years. I'm supposed to be 18-month tour. He said, I don't give a damn what the tour is. I want you here. I said, thank you, Command Sergeant Major. And I walked out the door and said, I ain't really listening, so. Excuse me. So anyway, yeah, that's, so that I went to work for a phone company after that, yeah. But,
I noticed a lot of the photographs you showed, and the last, yesterday's photographs, the source of the photographs was an Australian War Memorial Commission or something like that. Do they have a really good collection of this kind of stuff?
no, they're my photographs.
Okay, no, some of the maps though.
Oh, some of the maps, yeah, well, I don't know what the Australians got. I know they ran tunnels also, and they almost found the big complex.
Yeah.
If they had gone down one more layer, but they didn't. Yeah, they'd have found all the headquarters for the South, the Viet Cong, the PLF and stuff were all stored down there. But they didn't go down the next level, so they missed out.
They didn't want that map.
Probably not. Probably not.
I've heard the Australians were pretty tough fighters.
I heard that too. but we never worked with them. I don't know where they're at, where they were at. I'm assuming some of them were in Third Corps, because one time I saw them go by on a convoy. But they kind of stuck to themselves. But yeah, I understand they were good fighters too. Yeah.
See, real quick, you mentioned the Iron Triangle once or twice. I know the term. What did it actually mean? What was the term meaning? Iron Triangle.
Well, the Iron Triangle consisted of Ben Suck, Ben Cat, and Fu Kong, and that's the Iron Triangle was where all the bad guys, where it was really concentrated.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where a lot of your majority of your tunnels, your bunker complexes, and all that. That's where you go in and get your butt kicked real quick. And they had areas in there where I could go from that wall to that wall and pick out 15, 20 booby traps from that wall to that wall and clear them. Come back the next day and they'll all be back there again. So
it referred to the enemy's defensive capability.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, Ben Suck, we leveled. I got some pictures of that. They took all the people out of there because it was controlled by the Viet Cong, and they put them, I don't know where they put them, but then they just leveled the village, and that still didn't do much. But anyway, that whole area over there, the Saigon River came down just to the right of the Iron Triangle, and it looked like a horseshoe. And we went in there one morning, and 2 days later, I moved maybe from here to that column over there. We were pinned down for 2 days because they were dug in around that horseshoe. And first day we had 14 guys killed and 44 wounded and couldn't get anybody out. And yeah, it was crazy. But, they were supposed to get the whole battalion in. They only got 3 companies in. Charlie Company never got in because they shot up so many of the choppers. They didn't have enough choppers left to bring the rest of the battalion in. So, but it is what it is.
I had a friend who was a tunnel rat. He was from Montana.
Montana.
They got in trouble with the law, and they gave him 2 choices:
Yeah.
the law, jail or
Army.
army.
Yeah.
He chose the army, and that's what he wound up doing.
Yeah. Well, when I was a drill sergeant, we got all the draftees. The judge say 4 years in jail, 4 years in the army. Yeah, we got thieves and you name it. We had them in there. Gang members. So yeah, I understand right what
He
you're
come
talking
back to
about.
Vietnam, he went to Alaska, and he trained sled dogs up there for several years.
That was
I
probably
asked
good
him,
for
I
him.
said, Keith,
After-
did you know any of those tin rod guys up there? He said, hell yeah, I knew all of them. But he trained sled dogs up there.
Well, that was probably good therapy for him after Vietnam. A lot of us needed therapy.
Did you get to come home, or did your mom and daddy send you some letters, or did you ever get leave?
That's a tough question to answer. Anyway, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, so I didn't get any letters, so, but, you know, that's all right. But yeah, I went to Taiwan for 5 days, but that was after I'd been in the field for 9 months. And then I came home in December. I stayed drunk for 30 days, and I went back to Vietnam for a second tour.
Is that when you got married?
No. But it was close.
Can you type?
Yeah.
I got a question. Did they not ever give y'all a coffee break?
Yeah, they gave us coffee break. Yeah. I don't know. Why do you do this to me?
Hey,
She's the same person asked me one day, says, when you're in a battle fighting and you need to move from here over to there, do they blow a whistle, something called timeout? I said, you got it, so. But yeah, coffee break was first thing in the morning. We take a canteen cup, fill about halfway with water. I always had C4, so we had the right means to cook it. We roll it up in little balls and light it with a match, burn like a gas stove. Get the water boiling, all the guys, 4 or 5 guys hung together. Throw all your coffee in there, your cocoa powder, fudge bar, whatever you could fit in there, and stir it up and be like a slurry, and you pass it around and drink it. And that was your breakfast. But the thing was about sea rations, they said, well, we're going to give you 4 days of sea rations or something like that. Well, they came in boxes like this. And you didn't have no place to carry a box. So we'd sit down, pull out all the fruit cocktail, peach halves, pear halves, all the fruit. Put that in our rucksacks and stuff. Then we'd have this big meal. We'd eat everything. And then you go out for the next 5, 6 days, or you're already out there, but next 5 or 6 days. And the guys that hump the boonies, you know what I'm talking about. You start out in the morning and you're busting jungle all day, or elephant grass, or whatever your mud or water, but all day long you're humping through that, and you're worried about booby traps and getting mortared or getting ambushed, and if you're fortunate and you don't get hit, then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe 5 o'clock, they say, all right, dig in. And you set up a company perimeter. So you, usually me and Gary, we dig our foxhole. We got our foxhole dug. Said, all right, now, you're either going on ambush patrol that night, or you're going on listening post, or you're going to be in your foxhole by yourself. Because everybody else is out there in the jungle looking for the bad guys. So you're trying to stay awake. Or sometimes Gary would be in the foxhole with us, but and that's only 50% chance of sleeping. Then the next day you get up, you fill your foxhole in, get your whatever you want to eat or whatever, put your rucksack on, get your gear on, hump the boonies again all day long. That night, dig in again.
Was it hot over there year round?
6 months it was so hot you'd cook. I mean, the coldest I was over there, it was 80 degrees.
Oh.
I was laying in a rice paddy, had my M14 on a dike, and it was raining so hard I couldn't see you where you're sitting right now. My teeth were chattering, my body was shaking, and I looked up in the sky and said, Lord, what did I do? Or you put me in this mess. So anyway, that's the coldest I was, it was 80 degrees. But during the dry season, it gets so dry that depending on where you were, if you were in the southern part of Vietnam, the ground was like gray clay. If you were further north, it was red. So it would dry out so much, you stomp your foot, it was like talcum powder. It just flowed up, and it would get on you, and it would get in your pores.
So you would be either red or gray, and they could tell you what part of Vietnam you came from. So,
During the monsoon, what were the chances that any of them drown in those tunnels? How do they keep all the water out?
they sealed the doors well enough to, water didn't get in.
And then water.
They were usually up on higher ground anyway, but, it gets crazy. The monsoon, when it first starts, you can set your watch by it, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you know it's gonna rain. And then after that, it just rains every day, all day and all night. And places you could walk through like this, you can't swim through now, cause the water would be up here somewhere. But, it was, monsoons were crazy, but so was the dry weather, so.
What, oh, just real quick, so I know you had so many dangers to worry about when you're in the tunnel. Did you ever fight claustrophobia? You just didn't think about it because you...
No, I never did.
Okay.
First couple times, it was like deer hunting. When you see the first deer and your heart's going boom, 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 boom. I experienced that, but the good Lord blessed me with the ability. I had like a sixth sense, and I could see things other people couldn't see. I could see booby traps, strip wires. I could study the trail and see if it was being used or not, and I was quite fortunate in that, and I carried that with me for quite a while, even after Vietnam, but now I'm an old man. It just kind of faded away like I am. How old are you? How old are you? How old are you? Oh, no. I'll be 79, and 9/11's my birthday. 79. Yeah, I know, you're an old man. 88. 88.
Yeah, you're young.
Yeah. I look younger, thank you.
Yeah, you're young.
Here, let me give you some money.
What was the tallest tunnel rat you met? Was there a limitation on the size or smallest?
Well,
I heard
most of the guys were small, because the tunnels, you had to crawl on your hands and knees, and it was strictly voluntary. So, like in my company, Gary and I started doing it, and after that, we were the tunnel rats. Anytime they found something, Heater, Bowman, get up here. And for the, mostly for the year, it was just Gary and I, and then Gary got blowed up, and then it was just me. I had a lot of guys say, oh, I want to run a tunnel with you, Bowman. I said, okay, come on. And they get halfway in the tunnel and they stop. I said, what's the matter? You booby trap or something? They said, no, I can't go any further. I said, what do you mean? I said, I can't go any further. So back out, it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. But it's like, yeah, it was a dangerous job, but I had a buddy who was in the 75th Ranger. He used to go across the border. Comes up to me one day. A lot of cuss words. Bowman. I said, what? He said, you're crazy. I said, what do you mean I'm crazy? I'd never go down one of them damn tunnels. I said, oh, Mike, it's a matter of perspective. What the hell do you mean matter of perspective? I said, well, you and 4 other guys will get on a helicopter and fly into Cambodia or Laos and get them to drop you off in middle of 20,000 MVA and sneak around 4 or 5 days and try not to get caught. Now who's crazy? He said, you are. He said. It's like a machine gunner or not. His life expectancy was 10 seconds. Once the battle started, his life expectancy was 10 seconds. Because that's the first weapon you try to take out. Right. Then you had lurch. You had point men. Guys that walk point. They walk 75, 100 yards, sometimes out in front of the company, busting trail, looking for booby traps, whatever. Trying to get the bad guys to shoot first before they hit the main body of the company. So, yeah, everybody had a job to do. The job with the grunts the guys on the left and the guys on the right. Me trying to keep them alive, them doing the same for me. And trying to make it home.
I've heard the sentry dogs that he used over there saved a lot of lives.
I don't know. I didn't, I wasn't in any place secure enough to see a sentry dog.
You said you didn't take any extra batteries with you. How many extra clips did you take? It didn't look like you were carrying anything much.
I wasn't. I only had one magazine. That's all they gave me. But that's why I said when the slide locked back, it was time to go. But yeah, well, you know, and it got crazy after a while, especially after Gary got blown up, and you kind of just say, well, you know, what the hell, I'm probably going to get blown away too. So, you know, it upset me quite a bit, and I went off the deep end a little bit, and I started going in the tunnel with a flashlight in one hand and a stick in the other. And the captain said, where's your pistol? I said, it's in my back pocket. He said, well, what if you run into bad guys? I said, well, we're going to find out who's fastest on the draw. And after that, you know, people kind of steer away from you. They don't want to hang around with you too much. But, yeah, you get this mystique about you that them people are crazy. So, yeah, but anyway. Any other questions?
I got one.
Oh, I got one.
I'm 75 years old. I
Yes.
grew up during the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
I never had to serve a day in my life. I got hurt playing football and couldn't go in the military.
Okay.
But my dad he was a Korean veteran
Mm-hmm.
in the Navy, but he had a great respect for what he called American heroes.
Oh, don't you call me hero. Do not call me hero. I am not a hero.
Well, my talk just got stopped.
Do not call me a hero. I'm just doing a job that other people couldn't do, but you guys also did jobs other people couldn't do. My hero was that lieutenant I showed you.
Yeah.
That's my hero. And I appreciate it, but that upsets me.
You're a great American.
Oh, thank you. But I'm not a hero. I just did what I had to do. I was the old guy. I was 20 years old. The other guys, they were married, had children, whatever. I didn't have anything to go home to. It didn't matter. Part of the ground tunnels was proving myself. I always told I was a dumb idiot. I'd be nothing but a ditch digger, and I'd be a bum the rest of my life. So I outdid them all. So anyway.
CW, on Apple TV, there's a series